Many people believe that losing belly fat is simply a matter of calories. Eat a little less, exercise a little more, and the body will automatically become leaner. But if you have ever experienced months of intense training, reduced your food portions, even given up many of the foods you love, yet your belly hardly changes, there is a very high chance that the problem is not your willpower or discipline. The issue lies in a deeper biological mechanism, one that quietly operates inside the body, but is rarely explained clearly to most people. During many years of studying metabolic physiology, one of the things that impressed me the most is how the human body functions like an intelligent survival system, far more sophisticated than we usually imagine. It is not a simple computer where you input calories and receive weight loss as an output. Instead, the body resembles a complex chemical laboratory where thousands of hormonal signals, enzymes, and nervous system responses constantly communicate with one another to decide a single priority: how to protect your survival. For that reason, when the body senses that the internal environment is unsafe, it prioritizes storing energy rather than burning it. And the very first place the body chooses to store excess energy is the abdominal area. This is not random. Visceral fat, the layer of fat located deep around organs such as the liver, intestines, and pancreas, is not merely passive fat tissue. Modern biological research has shown that it actually functions like a real endocrine organ. It has the ability to release hormones, generate inflammatory signals, and even influence how other organs in the body operate. When this fat begins to accumulate, it not only increases the size of your waistline, but also sends biochemical signals that make it progressively harder for the body to lose fat. That is why the harder some people try to lose weight, the more their bodies seem to resist. To understand this more clearly, we need to look at an organ that is often overlooked in discussions about weight loss: the liver. The liver is not simply the place where alcohol is processed or toxins are filtered, as many people assume. In reality, the liver is the central coordinator of the body's energy metabolism. It participates in fat processing, glucose metabolism, bile production, filtering metabolic waste, and even regulating many important hormones. When the liver functions optimally, it helps the body maintain energy balance efficiently. But when the liver becomes overloaded with refined sugars, industrial oils, environmental toxins, and prolonged stress, the entire metabolic system becomes affected. Imagine the liver as the filter of an engine. If that filter becomes clogged, the engine cannot run smoothly even if you pour the highest quality fuel into the tank. The same thing happens in the human body. When the liver is overloaded, the body activates a natural defense mechanism, storing toxins inside fat cells to protect other vital organs. This is a remarkably intelligent survival strategy. Instead of allowing toxins to circulate freely in the bloodstream and damage the heart, brain, or kidneys, the body packages them inside fat tissue. As a result, the fat around the abdomen begins to thicken, not only because of excess energy, but also because the body is trying to protect itself. This explains why many people can eat relatively healthy diets, yet still struggle to lose belly fat. The issue is not only about how much food you consume, but also about how your body processes and eliminates metabolic waste. When the natural detoxification systems, especially the liver and the lymphatic system, operate sluggishly, the body enters what we could call a metabolic protection mode. In this state, the body prioritizes storing energy and limits fat burning. Another crucial biological factor that needs to be understood is the role of insulin. Insulin is often described as the hormone that controls blood sugar, but its influence goes far beyond that. In reality, insulin is a powerful signal that determines whether your body will store energy or release it. When insulin levels are high, the body is almost locked out of its ability to burn fat. This is not just a metaphor, it is a biochemical reality. The enzymes responsible for breaking down fat become suppressed when insulin rises. Therefore, if the body is constantly exposed to large amounts of sugar and refined carbohydrates throughout the day, insulin rarely drops low enough to allow fat burning to occur. One of the fascinating aspects of metabolic biology is that the body possesses an incredibly powerful self-cleaning mechanism known as autophagy, often translated as self-eating. This is the process through which the body breaks down and recycles old or damaged cellular components in order to generate new energy and building materials. When autophagy is activated, the body does not simply clear out malfunctioning cells. It also begins to utilize stored energy reserves, including fat. However, autophagy functions most effectively only when the body is not constantly receiving signals that food is abundant. This means the hormonal and metabolic environment must allow the body to shift into a state of repair and regeneration, rather than remaining in a continuous state of digestion and storage. In addition, we must consider the role of mitochondria, the tiny energy factories inside every cell. Mitochondria are where fat is converted into usable energy. When mitochondria function efficiently, the body can burn fat effectively. But when mitochondrial function becomes impaired due to chronic inflammation, poor sleep, mineral deficiencies, or diets rich in ultra-processed foods, the body's capacity to burn fat declines significantly. In that state, you may feel persistently fatigued, while your waistline gradually expands over time. Another factor that many people overlook is stress. The hormone cortisol, released when the body experiences stress, has a direct influence on abdominal fat accumulation. In ancient survival environments, cortisol helped humans react quickly to danger. In the modern world, however, where stress can arise from work pressure, financial concerns, sleep deprivation, and social demands, cortisol levels often remain elevated for long periods. When this happens, the body interprets the environment as unsafe and begins storing energy around the abdomen as a form of future reserve. In addition, the lymphatic system, an essential component of both the immune and detoxification systems, also plays a role in this process. Unlike the circulatory system, which has the heart to pump blood, the lymphatic system relies largely on body movement to circulate lymph fluid. When physical activity is limited or the body becomes dehydrated, the lymphatic system can become sluggish, allowing metabolic byproducts to accumulate in tissues. This can lead to sensations of bloating, swelling, and fluid retention that may even resemble fat accumulation. When we step back and observe this entire biological picture, it becomes clear that losing belly fat is not merely a matter of the gym or the dining table. It is the outcome of a complex system in which the liver, hormones, mitochondria, the nervous system, sleep, and the gut microbiome all participate in a coordinated process. When these systems function in harmony, the body can naturally shift into a fat-burning state. But when one or more links in this system become disrupted, the body responds by conserving energy rather than releasing it. This realization marks the starting point for understanding how to restore the body's internal biological environment so that fat is no longer needed as a protective shield but becomes an energy reserve the body is willing to release. When we begin to view the body as an intelligent biological system rather than a simple machine, an important truth gradually becomes clearer. The body always responds to its internal environment. It is not irrationally working against you, nor is it too lazy to burn fat, as many people assume. In reality, the body is simply performing its fundamental duty, protecting life. If the internal environment signals that toxins are accumulating, that energy levels are unstable, or that the hormonal system is out of balance, the body will choose the safest option. Holding on to energy, that energy is typically stored as fat, particularly around the abdomen, where the body can easily mobilize it when needed. Interestingly, this mechanism is not a flaw of the body, but an evolutionary inheritance. For thousands of years, the ability to store energy allowed humans to survive periods of food scarcity. But in the modern world where food is constantly available and chronic stress has become the norm, this same survival mechanism can trap many people in a cycle of weight gain. One of the subtle yet powerful forces influencing this process is chronic low-grade inflammation within the body. Unlike acute inflammation that occurs when you are injured or infected, this type of inflammation develops quietly and can persist for years without obvious symptoms. It often originates from diets high in ultra-processed foods, oxidized vegetable oils, refined sugar, combined with lifestyles characterized by poor sleep and ongoing stress. When this low-grade inflammation persists over time, it begins to directly affect how cells respond to hormones. One of the most significant consequences is a decline in insulin sensitivity. As cells become increasingly resistant to insulin, the body must produce larger amounts of insulin to maintain stable blood sugar levels. When insulin remains chronically elevated, the body's fat-burning mechanisms stay locked down. This creates a cycle that many people do not recognize. The more someone eats in a way that causes strong insulin fluctuations, the harder it becomes for the body to enter a fat-burning state. Yet the story does not end with hormones and inflammation. Another key player, acting as a central coordinator of metabolism, is the nervous system. Our nervous system operates primarily through two major states: the sympathetic state, often called fight or flight, and the parasympathetic state, associated with rest and recovery. When the body spends too much time in a stressed condition, the sympathetic system remains constantly activated. This leads to higher cortisol production, increased blood sugar, and a stronger drive for fat storage. But when the body returns to balance, where the parasympathetic system becomes more dominant, processes of recovery and regeneration begin to take place. In this state, the body can activate mechanisms such as autophagy, cellular repair, and the efficient use of stored energy. This helps explain why factors that appear unrelated to weight loss, such as deep breathing, slow walks in nature, or simply getting adequate sleep, can profoundly influence metabolic health. These practices shift the nervous system back into a restorative state, creating the internal conditions in which the body can finally release stored energy rather than continuing to hold on to it. Another aspect that is often overlooked in discussions about belly fat is the gut microbiome. Inside every person's digestive system live trillions of bacteria, and these tiny microorganisms can directly influence how the body absorbs energy from food. A balanced microbiome can help regulate appetite, improve insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammation. In contrast, when the microbiome becomes imbalanced, certain strains of bacteria may increase cravings for sugar and refined carbohydrates. This can make many people feel as if they are fighting against their own bodies, as cravings appear even when they are trying to eat healthily. In reality, this is not a lack of discipline. It is a signal from the microbiome attempting to maintain its own preferred environment. When the microbiome is rebalanced through fiber-rich foods, fermented foods, and a diet low in processed products, the body begins to change the way it responds to food. Sugar cravings gradually decrease, energy levels become more stable, and metabolic processes grow more flexible. Alongside the microbiome, essential minerals in the body also play a critical role in regulating metabolism. Minerals such as magnesium, potassium, and sodium participate in hundreds of biochemical reactions and help cells communicate efficiently with one another. When the body becomes deficient in these minerals, many biological processes begin to slow down. Mitochondria function less efficiently, nerve signals become disrupted, and enzymes involved in fat metabolism no longer operate optimally. As a result, the body can shift into an energy conservation mode in which everything slows down from metabolic rate to the body's ability to recover after physical activity. Another key factor that many people have only recently begun to recognize is the relationship between the liver and thyroid hormones. The thyroid gland is often described as the body's metabolic speed regulator, determining how much energy you burn throughout the day. What is less frequently discussed, however, is that the liver plays a crucial role in converting thyroid hormone from its inactive form into its active form. When the liver functions efficiently, this conversion process occurs smoothly, helping the body maintain a stable metabolic rate. But when the liver becomes overloaded with fat and toxins, this conversion process can be disrupted. This means that even if your thyroid gland produces normal levels of hormone, the body may still display signs of a slow metabolism, such as fatigue, cold hands and feet, and a tendency to gain weight easily. In addition, one of the most important moments for the body to recalibrate its entire metabolic system occurs during sleep. During deep sleep, the body releases growth hormone, a hormone capable of stimulating fat, burning, and tissue repair. At the same time, the brain begins clearing metabolic waste through the lymphatic system, a specialized cleaning system that functions most effectively while we sleep. When sleep is disrupted by blue light exposure, stress, or eating too late at night, this entire recovery cycle becomes compromised. The body enters the next day with lower energy levels, more hormonal imbalance, and a reduced ability to burn fat. When all of these factors are placed side by side, the liver, hormones, nervous system, microbiome, minerals, mitochondria, and sleep, we begin to see a more complete picture of why belly fat can become so stubborn. It is not a single problem, but the result of multiple biological systems interacting with one another. When one link in the system is disrupted, the others are affected as well. Yet the encouraging reality is that the opposite is also true. When the internal environment of the body improves, each system begins to support the others. The liver functions more efficiently, hormones stabilize, mitochondria produce energy more effectively, and the body gradually shifts into a natural fat-burning state. That is when many people begin to realize something important. Fat loss is not a battle against the body, but rather the process of restoring the balance the body was designed to maintain. If we continue exploring the biological mechanisms behind fat loss, one of the most important concepts to understand is that body fat is not burned randomly. It is released only when specific biological signals are activated. Inside every fat cell exist special receptors, functioning like tiny locks on the surface of the cell. These receptors receive signals from the nervous system that trigger the release of fatty acids from the cell into the bloodstream, where they can be used for energy. In biology, these are known as beta-adrenergic receptors. When these receptors are properly activated, the body begins shifting from energy storage mode into energy mobilization mode. However, in many modern lifestyles, these receptors become almost silenced. The reason is usually not that they disappear, but that the biochemical environment inside the body no longer allows them to function efficiently. One of the major factors that weakens fat release signaling is the combination of chronically high insulin and metabolic inflammation. When insulin levels remain elevated for long periods, the body interprets this as a signal that energy from food is still plentiful, making it unnecessary to use stored energy reserves. At the same time, persistent low-grade inflammation alters how cells respond to hormonal signals. The receptors become less sensitive, similar to a radio signal filled with interference. As a result, even if you exercise more frequently, the signal that mobilizes fat may still not be transmitted effectively. This explains why many people experience a frustrating situation. They work out regularly, yet their bodies do not respond in the way they expect. At this point, we begin to see the importance of shifting the body's metabolic state. In biological terms, there are two primary energy use modes. The first is the glucose-burning state, in which the body relies mainly on glucose derived from carbohydrates for energy. The second is the fat-burning state, where the body uses fatty acids and their metabolic byproducts as a stable, long-term energy source. Both states are natural and necessary. The problem with modern lifestyles, however, is that many people become almost permanently stuck in the glucose-burning state. When the body is constantly exposed to meals rich in refined carbohydrates, insulin rarely drops low enough to activate fat utilization. Over time, the body gradually loses its ability to switch smoothly between these two states, a phenomenon many scientists refer to as metabolic inflexibility. Metabolic flexibility is actually a hallmark of good health. A healthy body can move fluidly between burning glucose and burning fat, depending on energy availability and activity levels. For example, after a meal, the body uses glucose to provide quick energy. But when the time between meals extends, the body begins switching to stored fat as fuel. This natural mechanism helped humans survive throughout thousands of years of history. However, when modern diets constantly stimulate insulin, the body rarely has the opportunity to activate this process. As a result, stored fat remains locked inside fat cells while your energy levels continue to fluctuate dramatically. Another factor that directly affects the body's ability to release fat is the lymphatic system. This is a network responsible for transporting fluids and metabolic waste throughout the body. Unlike the circulatory system, which has the heart as a central pump, the lymphatic system relies entirely on muscle movement and breathing to circulate. When we move very little, sit for long periods, or become dehydrated, lymphatic flow slows down. As a result, metabolic byproducts accumulate in tissues, increasing the feeling of swelling and causing the body to retain water. In many cases, what people believe to be fat is actually a combination of fat and fluid retention caused by inefficient lymphatic circulation. In addition, we must also mention a biochemical process that is rarely discussed but has a significant influence on aging and energy metabolism: glycation. Glycation occurs when sugar molecules attach to proteins in the body, creating rigid and less flexible structures. This process is sometimes compared to a form of rust developing inside the body. As glycation accumulates, many biochemical reactions become less efficient. Enzymes begin to function more slowly. Tissues lose elasticity, and the body's ability to metabolize energy declines. This not only affects the skin and the aging process, but also makes fat loss more difficult. When the body operates in an environment dominated by glycation, metabolic systems simply cannot perform at optimal efficiency. One of the key ways to reverse this situation is to improve the body's internal biological environment. When the liver, gut, and nervous system begin to function in greater harmony, a cascade of positive changes can occur. The liver processes fat more efficiently, the gut microbiome supports better nutrient absorption, and the nervous system shifts from a stress state into a recovery state. When these systems begin to operate together, hormonal signals start to change. Insulin becomes more stable, cortisol gradually decreases, and fat-burning hormones begin to activate. Interestingly, when the internal biological environment improves, many people begin to notice changes not only in their body weight, but also in their energy levels and mental clarity. They feel more alert in the morning, experience fewer sugar cravings during the day, and can maintain steady energy for hours without constantly needing to eat. These are signs that the body is gradually shifting toward using fat as its primary fuel source. When this transition occurs, fat is no longer an inaccessible storage layer but becomes an energy reserve that the body can mobilize when needed. Another important factor in this process is how the body regulates pH balance and electrolyte equilibrium. Small factors, such as how much water you drink, how many minerals you consume, or even how you breathe, can influence the chemical environment of the blood. When this internal environment is balanced, the enzymes involved in fat burning function more effectively. Mitochondria produce energy more efficiently, and cells communicate with one another more precisely. It is similar to optimizing the electrical grid of an entire city. When the power supply is stable and transmission lines function smoothly, every other system begins operating more efficiently as well. At this point, we begin to recognize an important truth. Fat loss is not a battle against the body. It is the process of removing the barriers that prevent the body from doing what it was naturally designed to do. The human body has the ability to regulate its weight naturally when the internal environment is optimized. But when this environment is disrupted by stress, ultra-processed foods, sleep deprivation, and inactivity, the body is forced to prioritize survival rather than metabolic efficiency. When we approach the issue from this perspective, our understanding of weight loss begins to change. Instead of focusing only on eating less or exercising more, we begin to focus on restoring the body's internal biological environment. When the liver is properly supported, when the microbiome is balanced, when hormones stabilize, and when sleep becomes a priority, the body starts functioning in an entirely different way. Processes that were once locked begin to reopen. Stored fat is no longer necessary as a defense mechanism, and the body gradually releases it as a natural energy source. This is often the moment when many people realize that transforming the body is not a stressful battle. It is more like restoring an ecosystem that has been out of balance for a long time. When the internal environment is cleansed and biological signals are restored, the body begins returning to the state it was designed to maintain, a state where energy is abundant, metabolism is flexible, and body weight stabilizes naturally. When we assemble all of these biological pieces together, a completely different picture of fat loss begins to emerge. For many years, the weight loss industry has convinced people that their bodies are enemies that must be controlled. They are taught that if weight does not decrease, the problem must be a lack of discipline, willpower, or effort. But modern metabolic science tells a very different story. Most of the time, the body is not resisting you because you are weak. It is protecting you from a biological environment it perceives as unsafe. When the liver is overloaded, hormones are imbalanced, the nervous system is constantly stressed, and sleep is disrupted, the body receives a very clear message. This is not the right moment to release stored energy. In that situation, holding on to fat becomes a survival strategy rather than a biological mistake. This leads us to an important shift in how we approach health. Instead of forcing the body to lose weight through extreme methods, science increasingly shows that it is far more effective to restore the internal environment when the liver is supported in performing its detoxification functions, when the gut microbiome is nourished with natural fiber-rich foods and beneficial microbes, and when the nervous system returns to balance through deep sleep and a stable rhythm of life, the entire metabolic system begins to change. Insulin gradually stabilizes, cortisol fluctuations decrease, and fat release receptors begin responding again to the body's signals. At that point, fat is no longer required. As a protective layer, it becomes a source of energy the body is willing to mobilize when needed. One factor that is often underestimated in this process is sleep. During deep sleep, the body enters a unique biological state in which many critical restorative processes occur simultaneously. Growth hormone is released, stimulating tissue repair and mobilizing energy from stored reserves. At the same time, the brain activates its natural cleaning system to remove metabolic waste that accumulates throughout the day. If sleep is disrupted by blue light exposure, stress, or late-night eating habits, the body misses this crucial opportunity to reset its hormonal systems. As a result, the next day begins with a less stable metabolic foundation, and the cycle of fat accumulation continues. Understanding this reveals that fat loss is actually the result of a healthy biological ecosystem. The liver, gut, hormones, nervous system, mitochondria, and sleep are all parts of that ecosystem. When one component becomes disrupted, the entire network is affected. But when each component is restored, they begin supporting one another in remarkable ways. The liver processes fat more efficiently. The gut microbiome stabilizes blood sugar and reduces cravings. Hormones become balanced, and cells begin using energy flexibly. In this state, the body does not need to be forced to lose fat. It naturally shifts into a fat-burning mode because that is the most biologically logical state. There is an interesting paradox in the health journey that many people only discover after years of searching. When they stop trying to control the body through force and instead begin caring for the internal environment, the body responds in an entirely different way. Energy levels rise, concentration improves, sleep deepens, and appetite becomes stable. In that context, fat loss is no longer a stressful goal that must be pursued every day. It becomes the natural consequence of a body functioning according to its biological design. The most important thing to remember is that the human body was not designed to resist health, it was designed to move toward balance. When the correct biological signals are restored from how we eat, how we sleep, how we move, and how we manage stress, the metabolic system begins functioning like a finely tuned machine once again. At that point, the fat that once existed as a protective mechanism gradually becomes unnecessary. And when the body recognizes that the internal environment is safe, it will do what it has always been capable of doing: release that stored energy to support a healthier, more flexible, and more energetic body. Therefore, if there is one essential scientific message to take from this entire journey, it is this: health is not a war against the body, it is a partnership with it. Once you understand the biological logic behind how the body functions, you are no longer pulled into the endless cycle of quick fixes and promises of instant weight loss. Instead, you begin building a solid foundation for long-term health. And once that foundation is in place, the body will take care of the rest, just as decades of metabolic science have consistently demonstrated.